We have some pretty big news out of OpenAI. They have announced they have surpassed $1.6 billion in annualized revenue. And this is, of course, despite all the drama that happened with OpenAI and Sam Altman getting kicked out and, a bunch of other competitors trying to steal some of their customers. We're going to break down all of that and some interesting things about Anthropic, how much money they've been making on the podcast today. So let's get into it. I wanted to mention today's podcast is sponsored by AI Box. If you're looking at investing in a cutting-edge AI startup, AI Box is my very own no-code AI app builder and marketplace. I'll drop a link in the description. You can go check it out.
We gon' bring it to you just like that. Welcome everyone to the future. It's AI Chat, bringing you the interviews and giving you info to be in the know from tech company CEOs of. Rock with us, bet you gon' come back. I'm just saying the facts. This is AI Chat. Let's go.
The big headline here is that OpenAI has surpassed $1.6 billion in annualized revenue. So this is actually up 20% from around the middle of October. They were essentially, I think they announced kind of what the revenue was at, and they're up 20% from there. Of course, all of this is despite in November when Sam Altman was fired, there was a ton of news. I even did some YouTube videos covering it, but essentially a bunch of competitors to ChatGPT, Anthropic notably, and a number of others, they started actually going after OpenAI's customers. They released a bunch of new features. They were trying to get bigger context windows and do like browsing and a bunch of other interesting stuff to essentially steal customers away. So despite all of that debacle, which no doubt impacted OpenAI to some degree, whether you want to say that was a ton or a little, they've very, very impressively been able to pull out these super high numbers. So there's some members of OpenAI's management team who recently spoke to the journal or whatever, the information. And according to them, some of the management team over OpenAI actually believe that OpenAI can hit $5 billion or more by the end of this year. So this is going to be very interesting to see if that happens. OpenAI, of course, talking about where they make their money, they got a couple different options. A lot of people, of course, talk about OpenAI generating revenue from you get a subscription, you get ChatGPT Premium. So that's obviously a big aspect of it. But I actually think that another enormous, and I'm not sure how they actually break this out, but of course another enormous piece of that is their API that they have essentially for developers to be able to integrate OpenAI into developer software. I, for one, have my own company. Self-Pause is a no-code, or it's a AI life coach. And Self-Pause is, we just have an API linked to ChatGPT to help us with certain parts of our chat interface experience with and so anyways, we pay them monthly for all the usage that we have. I think it was a really smart move. There's a bunch of other players that have not made this, and I think that they probably are, they're probably losing out on a lot of opportunities. So notably, of course, we have Midjourney, who does not have an official API. Some people have kind of made bootlegged versions, but they're not official APIs, which makes it really hard for developers to want to integrate, for example, Midjourney into their software, because as soon as Midjourney comes out with an official API, or if they do any development updates, they could break the current API. It's just really uncertain, and so they lose out a lot. So I know Midjourney has made $200 million this year. I believe it could, or maybe total, but I believe it could be significantly higher if they had an API allowing people to integrate it. So I think OpenAI made a really good move there, and I think that's going to be a solid chunk of their revenue. So Bloomberg actually reported in December, so not that long ago, last month, right? The OpenAI is raising new funding at $100 billion valuation. I've heard the number kind of bounce around, to be honest. We know that they had a $10 billion valuation at the beginning of the year, and it was oh my gosh, that's crazy. And now it looks like it's I think before, if I remember correctly, before Sam Altman's whole debacle getting kicked out and coming back, I believe it was $94 million. So it seems like it may have actually increased since then, which a lot of people were no shot they get close to that valuation. It's going to be 60 million now because of all that uncertainty and stuff. But it seems like they've come back really strong. The whole team essentially surrounded Sam. So I think people know that he's well supported in the company. Now, a lot of people talked about the fact that this whole deal right now that's going down, everyone supported Sam and wanted to bring him back because they knew that essentially the secondary sale where the employees are going to be able to sell some of their shares, it's a little tricky because of the way the company's structured. But they knew that if Sam Altman got kicked out, there was no way they were going to be able to get their same valuations, and this whole share sale was going to be kind of put on the rocks. And so a lot of people are saying that's why people supported him, was kind of follow the money. But I mean, I think he's probably pretty well liked within the company. Either way, however you want to take it, Bloomberg's reporting that they're doing this at a $100 billion valuation. So that price right there means that there is a multiple of around 62x on its forward revenue. This, some people say this is pretty steep compared to, for example, publicly traded like enterprise software companies. But what I will say is, regardless of that criticism, I think this is still pretty consistent with a lot of other AI companies that are super fast growing, a lot of the other top AI companies. So an example, of course, is Anthropic, who is, I think they're currently generating around 200 million in annualized revenue. This is what they said to their investors earlier last year. I believe they said that's where they would be at. So assuming their forecasting is correct, that's what they should be at. And I think that at the same time, they are projecting for this year that they're going to hit at least $850 million in annualized revenue by next year. So they're saying, by the end of the year, we'll be on track to do 850 million. And that is a little bit of a tricky number because that doesn't mean that that's what they just did. And that doesn't mean that's what they're going to be doing this year. That just means that next year they'll be on track to do that. So that one's a little bit of a trickier number, assuming we, trust their forecasting and whatnot, because OpenAI, we know when we get the $1.6 billion number from them, that's literally what they just did. So I think it's, it's a little bit different. And, by next year, I'd be curious to see what OpenAI is. It's probably going to be closer to 5 billion. But, we'll see where that actually goes. In any case, what I did want to bring up, though, is, a lot of people are talking about how it's a little bit steep for OpenAI to be raising funding right now, their $100 billion valuation, 62x their forward revenue. But Anthropic currently is trying to raise money. They're talking to investors. They're doing some funding rounds. And their forward revenue is 75x forward revenue. That's what they're asking investors to pay in their most recent funding round. So while some people might think 62x is steep for OpenAI, it looks like their competitors are going at 75x. Now, some people say, well, of course, the valuation's so much smaller, so there's like a lot more potential theoretically for Anthropic to grow, and OpenAI is proving that it's possible. So people are saying that, but still at the same time, at the end of the day, like I would expect you to pay a little bit of a premium on the market leader, OpenAI, versus a premium on the runner-up. But regardless, both of these companies are doing really well. And I think Anthropic did a very good job of really capitalizing this year, being the number 2. Everyone knows Anthropic's Claude. It was, integrated into Poe by Quora famously and used a lot. And so I think they made a lot of moves where people actually tried it out. It's probably the second most talked about AI model that I've talked with people about. There's a couple others. There's Inflection. There's Perplexity. There's Grok on X. Like there's a handful of others, but I think as far as who's raised the most money, Anthropic is clearly the number 2. And I think as far as who's actually getting integrated the most, Anthropic's pretty solid. I've tested them out. And they were really famous for a lot of the year for the fact that they had the biggest context window, bigger than OpenAI. You could post a whole document or a transcript of like a book in there. But now OpenAI has raised their context windows. There's kind of a battle there, which I don't think actually matters in my humble opinion that much, because I think both the models still both struggle a little bit actually being able to pick stuff out of that full context window. Not that they can't do it, but it's a little bit harder than if you just give it a short prompt. But that's just kind of the nature of it. In any case, this is absolutely amazing. OpenAI, $1.6 billion in annualized revenue. I'm going to keep you up to date on all of their revenue and fundraising and where we see them moving in the future. Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? I record and publish podcasts on a platform called Spotify for Podcasters, and I absolutely love it. Essentially, you can upload from your phone or computer, and it distributes to every platform that plays podcasts. They support video podcasts, and you can make money on the platform with ads or even podcast subscriptions, something that has made my life so much easier as a podcaster. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you give it a try. You can download the Spotify for Podcast app or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started on your podcast today. Thank you for listening to the AI Chat Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, I'd appreciate it if you rate me wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're looking for an innovative group of AI enthusiasts, make sure you check out our Discord channel and also our Facebook community. It's obviously a lot more interactive than a podcast, where we can actually share software tools, prompts that we're using in everyday AI. I'll leave a link for those in the description below.